Hideo Kojima's preferences have remained largely unchanged in over 4 decades, and his style of direction is something he's long refused to compromise on, and that is why you see his thumbprint so clearly on pretty much every game he's ever made.
My dream right now is keep on creating games until I die.
He doesn't just talk about how games should be made, he will walk that path even if it takes him out of the door and straight off the edge of a cliff. The rise of Hideo Kojima. Having begun life as a fanboy with a penchant for cloning his favourite masterpieces, tributes to global cinema have of course always been at the heart of his games. As you can see from his early title Policenauts, he didn't just trace the characters, but entire scenes too.
Book publishers and even movie producers are trying to make video games pay off for them.
Popular pastimes in the country right now, but will this popularity last is the question.
Thing is, back in the day, movie studios didn't really care all that much about video games. They treated them like a side hustle for kids, and so whether you were stalking hotel corridors in Central Park as Macaulay Culkin from Home Alone 2, or gunning down henchmen as Riggs and Murtaugh in Lethal Weapon, the studio's meager investments would routinely result in a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up that played like the same game, except for the color palettes and graphics swapped out. So for sure, Kojima wasn't licensed by Hollywood, they didn't even know who he was, but he didn't do it for the money, and that's what's important to remember. Like any great artist, he did it for himself, taking what he loved and recreating it in his own image by whatever means he had available to him. A lack of English language versions protected him from the Hollywood lawyers, and so for a short time allowed him to indulge in his deep, genuine love for movies by recreating 80s hits that Hollywood didn't have the foresight to capitalize on. And only now in hindsight do we have a good laugh at how unabashed he was. The thing is though, until cinema's greatest creatives recognized the game industry's potential and injected their own artistic brilliance, video games would continue to boast nothing more than untapped potential, and it was within this creative void that Hideo Kojima would unintentionally carve a path. When Quentin Tarantino was asked if he went to film school, he said, "No, I went to films," and the same was true for Kojima, who had the added challenge of leading his team to overcome current hardware restraints in order to get the experience as close to being cinematic as possible. And so his pragmatic approach of duplicating the best cinema he knew allowed his team to hyper-focus on surpassing technical limitations and little else, which is why Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, a film he cites as being one of his most memorable cinematic experiences in his life, became the template for his game Snatcher, inspiring not just the characters down to their clothes and movements, but its famous backdrops too, as well as iconic shots, or entire scenes that would play out like their source material, frame by frame. The complexity of tying these homages together with a well-paced story and fun gameplay and equally an obsessive attention to sounds and music is immense, so plagiarism or not, and outdated or not,
You pervert!
his early works are some of the best historical examples of a game maker highlighting the potential of infusing games with cinema before it would become the norm. As the years moved on and his games gained public exposure, he shifted to a slightly less overt practice of mashing different tributes together. Like the intro to MGS, which starts with a torpedo vessel lifted from Escape from New York, whose protagonist Snake Plissken was of course the inspiration for all the snakes.
I don't like needles.
You don't like shots?
Call me Snake. Call me Snake. Pretty good. You're pretty good.
And then it plays out shot by shot like the infiltration scene from Michael Bay's The Rock, before then moving on to pull in countless other inspirations like crawling through the vents a la Die Hard. And he didn't actually just tap into cinema either. In his earliest games there are instances of characters and entire story arcs that have been lifted from written fiction. Or when it comes to the quirky humour and offbeat gags, a lot of Westerners just attribute that to being classic Kojima, but actually it traces its roots straight back to Japanese manga, where adult themes are often grounded with comic relief, along with that cartoony visual shorthand, which is universally used to soften the tone. Using these elements, he'd then construct winding, captivating narratives and fill them with a combination of characters who might be earnest, or goofy, or anywhere in between, all built on a solid platform of sci-fi themes, and this would be grounded by authentic and painfully researched detail. In particular, he pushed cinematics to new heights with painstaking attention to cinematography, and this would be punctuated with dialogue that sometimes was endearing or pretty thrilling.
You don't have what it takes to kill me.
But just as often could be excessive, or would expose a surface level understanding of his beloved source material.
I'm looking for Dr. Goodhead.
You just found her.
By echoing the style but seemingly misunderstanding the substance.
That's the president's right-hand man.
Die Hard Man.
And he's consistent with his themes too, satirizing politics, critiquing nuclear weapons, and probably most famously, finding genuinely clever ways to steer players away from violence. All respectable and progressive themes that he ironically goes and juxtaposes with juvenile tropes, which on its best day leans into fan service, or forces you to slog through a cringe fest or two.
Can you take a picture of us?
And on its worst, flirts with some pretty questionable themes.
She's only a child. 16 years old. They did terrible things to her.
I said no. That's illegal.
Some of which leave you wondering if the team were sitting in a giant circle jerk sniffing used panties while they brainstormed the idea. But the thing is, even if your tastes don't all align with Kojima's, at least you always know what you're going to get. A thoroughly original and fine-tuned adventure that boasts a fidelity that is beyond the current standard. And almost since the dawn of gaming, his titles have continued to be defined by these same hallmarks. However, there is one in particular that will define his legacy as a game maker, and that is his eternal pursuit of innovation. Now, his fan base is a broad bunch, and one of the many things they don't agree on is how smoothly a job the Phantom Pain did in rounding off the series' loose ends. However, smoothly or not, rounded off, Kojima definitely did, managing to complete the circle with pretty much his final breath, as Konami wrested control of the prized IP, kicking him out the door and proceeding to dangle it over his head like a playground bully flaunting stolen lunch money. Because make no mistake, this was always about money, and it still is. Let me explain. Birth of Konami. Konami was a young company when they entered the booming games market in the 70s, scoring hits like the iconic Frogger and Contra in the early 80s, and then console hits like Castlevania and then Metal Gear a few years after that. They produced literally hundreds of games to land these few successes, and for every few dozen flops they'd get lucky with one big hit, and that then paid for all the rest. But game development was risky. Nobody knew what drew players in, and these were first-generation game makers. They had no one to learn from, and they had to innovate and conquer hardware limitations with every step. And this in particular is where a young Hideo Kojima would excel. Undeterred by his early failures, he pushed his team to exceed their preconceived ideas about what was possible, all while he planned out ambitious cinema-inspired worlds that at first would drive his teammates up the wall, but before long would become his signature. With their growing success, Konami went public in the 80s, and as game making grew more complex and development costs grew, they narrowed their focus onto popular franchises like Metal Gear and Silent Hill. And Kojima's popularity made him a safe bet, earning him freedoms like his infamous box art credits, which fueled sales, but naturally his ego as well. And this practice would continue to build until he was habitually defying his budgets on every project, as much to management's annoyance, he always prioritized art over profit. And this worked out well for gamers, and for a while Konami too. It's why the Metal Gear series has remained so popular. But ultimately you have to remember that, as a public company, this is what Konami looks like to its owners. Incidentally, if you are enjoying this video, then a like or a subscribe is game changing for me, so I'd be so grateful if you could give me either. Thank you. Anyway, plug over, back to the video. Konami's volatile business model. So it's 2008, and the recession has hammered Konami's market value along with everything else, and all eyes are on Metal Gear Solid 4 as it tries to scrape back its $50 million budget, which it does do after a few years, but by the time it finally starts to turn a profit, Kojima has already eclipsed it with his next wave of spending on the new Fox engine. Furthermore, with Konami having long since disbanded the team behind the Silent Hill franchise for cost purposes, no surprise there, Kojima had drafted in director Guillermo del Toro to help him build a new one, and had already begun investing time and money into that project too. During this time, Kojima would sail past his allocated budget for the Phantom Pain, as was his practice, going on to rack up over 120 million in costs, and all the while Konami was trying to balance their books and silently praying that the game would be the success he promised. Love or hate Konami or anything in between, you can see how a business model this volatile might keep their head of finances up at night, and indeed by 2014, the heavy spending and meagre returns of the console games division were weighing so heavily on Konami's otherwise healthy finances that the Tokyo Stock Exchange flagged the entire company as a high-risk investment, and so forced to act, Konami management tightened the purse strings and demanded Kojima submit a strategy on how to complete the Phantom Pain on a shoestring budget. No doubt he pushed back, but there was no room left to fight. Thus, in March of that year, we the public would witness the controversial release of the demo-cum prequel chapter, Ground Zeroes. Priced at $30 for just 2 or 3 hours of gameplay, it didn't take a genius to figure out that it was a crude cash cow, and critics were quick to point this out, and had it been pretty much anyone else, sales would have probably flatlined, but to Kojima's credit, those 2 or 3 hours really hit the spot. The opening chapter boasted immensely detailed graphics. It had hard-hitting weather and mesmerizing lighting effects. The music was catchy, the sound effects were visceral, and it was all matched to his trademark carefully choreographed cinematics, and all of that actually came second to this satisfying movement control and a new generation of hyper-refined gameplay, the likes of which nobody had ever seen before. Still, it only shifted 1 million copies, and Konami saw maybe half of that, and $15 million wasn't close to enough to balance the books. Meanwhile, Konami had another rising star, Hideki Hayakawa, a corporate loyalist who you've probably never heard of, whose mobile games division was booming. And from his perspective, it probably made a lot of sense to suggest a complimentary handheld release that would be an effortless win, but it would have been one more stain on his upcoming masterpiece, and so Kojima wanted nothing to do with it. The problem was his studio was now about as far away from being the company's main source of revenue as it had ever been, and his continued efforts to protect Metal Gear from cheap monetization was further weakening his position in the company. And with so many faceless Konami executives circling a sinking Metal Gear and continuing to nip at its exposed flesh, at some point he saw the writing on the wall and decided in a very typical Kojima way to lash out. Kojima's Rebellion and Déjà Vu. So in order to keep up this ruse that Ground Zeroes was an independent title developed to give fans something to chew on while they waited, Kojima had been authorized to roll out additional content, and so 2 months after release, he put out the digital level called Déjà Vu. Buried within it, he hid a message to fans, making his feelings on the whole affair clear, and it was both brilliant and ballsy move that circumnavigated any non-disclosure agreements within his contract, while aptly sticking it to Konami. The level had an unassuming side mission in which you could navigate the complex with a black light to uncover the logos of all the past entries from the series. Find any game he directed and it gets wiped from existence.
Keep it up.
However, find a title that he didn't make.
Looks like that's nothing special.
At first glance, there's not much to it, as this wasn't the main objective, and so it wouldn't have been hard to hide. But it included recorded dialogue spoken by Miller, so there must have been some pre-planning and indeed production costs involved to pull it off. Yes, this pretty much continues throughout the entire level.
That one disappeared too. Huh.
You then conclude the hunt by wiping away Peace Walker, which is hidden on the back of the helicopter.
You erased all the markings, and every one of them will always be with you.
And knowing what we know now, well, the meaning behind Miller's message is clear. But in case you need it spelling out, that message is that any Metal Gear game without Kojima is not a Metal Gear game at all.
Kojima Productions? What does that mean? There's got to be a reason that's there.
Which is not a million miles away from asking his fans to boycott future productions he's not involved in. I mean, that is obviously conjecture on my part, but he has certainly implied it enough times. And when asked recently if he would play Delta, he outright laughed before coldly saying, "No, I won't." The real tragedy here, though, is that nobody knew what was going on behind closed doors, and so without context, the message was largely lost on fans. The irony is that it was not lost on Konami.
Konami's response.
Unfortunately for Kojima, he had no way of knowing at this point that Hayakawa was in fact being groomed to become the president of Konami's digital division, a newly formed level of middle management which had been tasked with stabilizing the company's finances by kicking the rogue elements of the business into line. His stunt had caused management to lose face, but the real issue with his insubordination was the prospect of what further damage he could cause if left unchecked. Kojima's love of hidden messages is widely known. He proved that silencing him with a non-disclosure agreement would be ineffectual as long as he had the full resources of the production at his disposal. A breakdown in their relationship could see him stuff as much anti-Konami propaganda into the game as he could dream up, but what he didn't know was that a breakdown of their relationship was exactly what management had planned next. At least after he completed the Phantom Pain, which of course was something that both he and Konami had a mutual investment in. And so to mitigate any chance of reprisal from their resident creative genius, Hayakawa enacted a response to his stunt of such magnitude that nobody, especially Kojima, could possibly have seen coming. And until 10 months later, nor would we the public, when GameSpot published a bombshell article quoting protected insiders.
There are current rumors of turmoil between Kojima Productions, the studio behind Metal Gear Solid, and Konami, the parent publisher.
Firstly, Kojima's entire senior team had been reclassified as contractors, stripping them of their legal protection and revoking their family's medical cover. Communication with the outside world was severed in the office at all times. Kojima and others were physically locked in offices for their full working day. Surveillance cameras were installed and security staff hired to actively monitor them in order to track the team's every movement. And for those who pushed back by quitting, they were then forbidden from listing Konami on their resumes, with multiple others reporting instances when their prospective employers had actually been warned off hiring them at all.
Yakuza! Go!
Now, Konami's never actually been linked to the Yakuza, and to be honest, I've looked and I can't see any evidence that they really are, but with this types of strong-arming and gangster-like tactics, you can see why internet forums then became abuzz with rumours that suggested otherwise. And eventually, September 2015 rolls around and the game is dropped to tremendous critical acclaim. And then, despite a photo surfacing in the days following that showed Kojima meekly enjoying an October leaving party, Konami publicly insisted that he was a happy full-time employee who was enjoying a happy, fully employed holiday. Nothing to see here, folks. Please move on.
Konami has begun removing the Kojima Productions logo from all official Metal Gear art.
The fact that they did this while simultaneously pulling the widely popular PT demo from the PlayStation Store overnight shows their disdain for gamers, making absolutely no effort to control the narrative.
According to a recent interview, Hideo Kojima is contractually forbidden from discussing his split from Konami.
The public's patience dried up, however, when the Phantom Pain won Best Action Adventure Game at the Game Awards a couple of months later, and Kojima was banned by Konami from attending.
Mr. Kojima had every intention of being with us tonight, but unfortunately he was informed by a lawyer representing Konami he would not be allowed to travel to tonight's awards ceremony to accept any awards.
Host Jeff Keighley voiced the feelings of thousands. There really was a lot of anti-Konami sentiment floating around at the time, and the stadium's reaction did reflect the wider feeling of fans, spilling online as it fueled arguments on forums and online boycotts, and was proliferated by public figures like Guillermo del Toro, whose Silent Hills project was axed along with Kojima.
Kojima's style breaks the barrier between cinema and games.
When Kojima picked up his award a year later, he kept it civil.
Gracias.
And when posting the clip online, on behalf of his good friend and collaborator,
Please enjoy.
Del Toro had just this to say.
Kojima's hidden content.
And just going back to Déjà Vu, just for a moment, his dedication to the art is like nothing else, because despite the importance of delivering this message, he still chose to wrap it up with the most absurdly niche Easter egg.
Every one of them will always be with you. You seem to be a fan of Hideo Kojima games. Thank you for all your support.
As with so much of the MGS content, there is actually a lot more to this seemingly innocent thank you message than you might think, and because Déjà Vu was basically a giant homage to the first Metal Gear Solid, to understand it we need to wind back to the 90s, when the legend of the lean, mean smoking machine Solid Snake was first established. During a boss fight with Psycho Mantis, he'd comment on other games you'd played.
I can see into your mind. You like Castlevania, don't you?
A flex that just blindsided you with its brilliance, having scanned your memory card for Konami's save data.
I see that you enjoy Konami games. Konami no game ga suki na you da na.
And for those Japanese players who had saves for Kojima's earlier titles, Snatcher and Police Notes, which didn't make it to the West, Mantis would remark that you're clearly a fan of Hideo Kojima games, with Kojima himself saying, "Thank you for your continued support." So this reference required that you'd played the Japanese release of MGS1 on the physical PlayStation, and to have played Snatcher or Police Notes on that same console, and then to be exploring the side objectives of the Western release of the DLC level Déjà Vu for the DLC game Ground Zeroes, and to remember it like 15 years later. How many gamers in the world would have picked up on that? And then there's the phrase, the writings on the wall, which signifies upcoming doom, which is actually an ancient biblical one, so Kojima would have known it. And this message that he put out about the loss of everything he held dear was literally written all over the walls.
Guess that can't be right.
I mean, am I reaching? Or did he intend it to be ironic? Who freaking knows? The point is, he packs so much discoverable content and outside-of-the-box thinking into his games that he doesn't only service those die-hard fans, he ensures that even the most casual gamers would struggle not to stumble across at least one or two instances of him poking his head out the screen with a cheeky wink. I mean that literally, his face was in MGS1. Dog tags in MGS2. He expanded MGS3, you can see him in the Spirit River, and he straight up appears in MGS4. By Peace Walker, he's actually in the game.
Mr. Kojima?
Before then going on to label himself as a deity.
Cecile's name is a message. Kojima is God.
Of course. And his likeness had pretty much peaked in Ground Zeroes.
That was perfect.
And by the Phantom Pain, his beloved creation is rescuing him, which is a blatant metaphor if ever I've seen one.
What took you so long?
This is exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to consistency and hallmarks that span the decades. Immersion breaking or not, these indulgences are an essential part of a Kojima game. But, and this is the important bit, they are not what make a Kojima game. These little touches, they're just a side effect of his creativity.
Come on, Snake.
It's his uncompromising approach to innovation and pushing boundaries that then goes on to make his games so great, and in turn, deserve your attention and your money when a new one appears on the shelf.
What are you doing? We've got to get a move on.
Konami shakes the industry.
And yet, great innovative games don't always equate to great financial return, which is why when Hayakawa took control shortly after the release of Ground Zeroes, he declared that the company would be abandoning the high-risk, low-return world of AAA game development in favour of the more reliable profits that were found in mobile games and pachinko machines. And it shook the whole industry, and everyone was basically asking the same thing. How does this make sense? The money in gaming these days is just so huge, it actually dwarfs both the movie and music industries combined by like 3 times. And so how could a globally revered IP like Metal Gear Solid possibly fail to stand up to pissy little mobile games? Well, pissy little mobile games make up half the market and cost a lot less to make, so that's pretty much all there is to it. But for Konami, that still pales in comparison to pachinko. So if you're wondering how a simple little slot machine could fit into all of this, well then the numbers are even crazier. As it all began with a board game called Bagatelle that emerged out of France back in the late 17th century. I actually inherited this one from my granny, which we used to play when I was growing up, and I freaking loved it. It is pretty addictive. And that was what evolved into the pinball machines that we all see around the world today. But in Japan, where it's illegal to gamble on pretty much anything other than certain races, the post-war years would give birth to pachinko parlors. And the game is basically just a specific type of pinball machine that fires tons of balls around. It's pretty fun actually. But the point is that a jackpot then spits out more balls, which are legally considered your prize. And so you can either keep playing with them, or you can eject them from the machine, and by trading those in at another shop, it circumnavigates the law. And no government has had the balls to outlaw them. But the reason that they haven't is because at their peak, the parlors made up a whopping 4% of Japan's gross national spending.
3,488.
It is a one-stop shop for gambling addicts, and Konami is all over it. And Konami sells and maintains these branded pachinko machines to parlors all around Japan, and in terms of raw profit, whether they invest 10 million into pachinko machines or 10 million into AAA games, they could roughly double their money either way. But MGS takes years to produce before they see a return, and carries the massive risk of being a flop, or landing on a recession year, or even just having to compete with another big release, something that Kojima has clearly not forgotten. And we will get back to that. But pachinko, on the other hand, generates twice the amount of the best-selling MGS title every single year, and without risk of a flop, and the money just comes trickling in from machine sales day after day. And so if you see the business as numbers, well, it's obviously a no-brainer. But considering the cost to Konami of freeing the franchise from Kojima's grasp was to have him thoroughly and publicly drag their name through the mud, you can be damn sure that Konami planned to make money out of their cash cow, even if they said otherwise. But the question did remain, how? And how do you make money from a poisoned chalice when you're the most hated name in town? Well, pachinko thrives on flashy marketing to draw the punters in, and they'd relied on a bunch of their titles, such as Castlevania up until that point. And then less than 6 months after they fired Kojima and unshackled MGS from his grasp, what do we get? Oh, you better believe it. And you can be sure that Hayakawa was behind that, doubling down with a fully animated Pashi slot machine that shone Snake Eater in a very new light. And in for a penny, in for a pound as they say, throwing Silent Hill 2 into the meat grinder as well, which, as you can imagine, had the recently disappointed Silent Hill fanbase up in arms as well, and the money kept rolling in. And then the following year they backtracked when they tried to make a quick buck off the Phantom Pain's latent assets with a microtransaction-infused spin-off Survive. Whether it was due to gamers still hating on Konami or the fact that it was bland and off-brand, who knows, but it crashed and burned so fast it deserves its own speedrunning record. And so they backed off a little bit and bided their time, re-releasing the originals to stop the brand from stagnating. But they know how to play the long game. Kojima taught them to wait for years at a time, and so despite fans responding to their name like this 10 years earlier,
any awards?
After a mere 8 years in exile, they pop their heads up to see what's happening, and this is how fans greet them.
Wait! Is that Metal Gear? Is that Snake?
Yeah, the world moved on quick, fans are fickle, and so Konami's out on bail with a tracker on their ankle, but they're basically free.
Let's go!
Free to make money. But how do they do that? Well, with a clever and actually pretty insidious approach to game making. Effectively, they've leveraged people's love for Kojima and their expectations for a AAA game by producing a AA game at best, and then charging people double what it's worth. And if you love Delta, then don't worry, I'm not knocking it, I'm just talking about the price. Just stick around, I'll knock it in a second. But for now, consider that the narrative structure is already fully refined, underlying assets already designed, the voice work and music already written and paid for and recorded and mastered, and the cinematics and even the camera angles painstakingly choreographed already. And I have no doubt that the devs are big fans of Kojima and passionate game makers who were forced to walk a tightrope of innovation. And they did a great job of preserving the essence of the original while sprucing it up with cool new ideas, from re-recording things like the theme song for an improved intro, through to quality of life upgrades like an equipable compass, through to asking all the models who featured on the game posters to supply updated shots, which resulted in this one particularly charming submission from a mother and her child. And like I said, these are authentic Kojima-esque touches, but they're not what make a Kojima game. Management forced them to approach innovation like salt in your food. A light sprinkling is essential to bring the flavour out, but they dare not add too much, or else they'd have an entire generation of fanboys gagging. And that's the problem. Nostalgia is a powerful drug. GTA 6 is reported to have eclipsed $1 billion to make, if not more, and analysts predict a price tag of $70, as is the standard price for AAA games these days, and the same cost as Delta. In any other industry where the price tag is set by the seller, weighing up the value is a key part of the review. but Snake Eater came from an era where its dominance of blockbuster shelves made it a universal love amongst a generation of gamers, and Konami relied on this generation, many of whom had today's senior gaming journalists, to get choked up on their memories as they played their free copies and didn't give a second thought to the price. And so reputable publications like Gaming Bible, Game Informer, Forbes, Push Square, and GameSpot all got choked up on their memories and lauded Delta with 9 out of 10s for a game that, while fun, pound for pound in no way deserves the same near-perfect score if judged against the same scoring mechanism as its source material. I mean, GameSpot only gave the original 8.7 for goodness sake. Is Delta a good game? Sure. But is it a near-perfect example of game making that raised the industry to new heights? And I know what you might be thinking, don't like the price? Don't buy it, wait for the sales. And you're right, and if I wasn't making a video, I would have. But I'm taking a step back from all of that for a minute, just because there's simply more to it than that. Firstly, check out what Kojima's team achieved in the 10 years between Snake Eater and Ground Zeroes. It is immense. And yet, with 11 years between Ground Zeroes and Delta, and what do we have to show for it? Shiny graphics? Unreal is easy to sell on looks, but it comes at a cost if you choose to look. And Kojima's Fox engine was dynamic, smooth, and immersive, and obsolete, because Konami scuppered the team that built it, and so they filled the void with the accessible indie favourite Unreal 5, which allowed them to outsource the grunt work to Singapore. But did they redirect that saved budget toward the less visible task of mitigating Unreal's infamous performance issues? Did they language? Shiny graphics help sell games, not frame rates. And then there's the movement and combat that was lifted from a decade-old Phantom Pain, and then had its smooth movement voluntarily regressed to play more like the original by targeting specific niche clunks from Snake Eater, like the frustrating crawling mechanics that would regularly have you back up into mines and electric fences. And combat is the same story, like when you throw an enemy to the ground. They did add a bunch more realistic judo throws to reflect the less refined CQC of a younger Snake, and that was great. But that's also just mocap, that's the easy bit. Animating a character was a lot harder back in the day, which is why when you wanted to keep an enemy unconscious, trying to kick them on the ground played out like you were trying to align yourself for a penalty shootout. And taking swipes at the air as they clambered up and triggered the alarm was infuriating, and it was as clunky then as it is now. But competition at the time was struggling with technical limitations of their own, and so you didn't resent the game for it. Kojima's team recognized this, and so they did away with these frustrations in MGS5 through the innovation of a more immersive alert system. The alert stages are of course integral to the Snake Eater experience, and so they had to stay for sure. But did the team invest time and energy to innovate a way to kick a downed enemy without pissing you off? No. So yes, Delta is authentic, and yeah, it does feel a little bit like playing the original game. But no, Kojima would never have let it out the door. He would have insisted that the team kept innovating until they found a way to please everybody. And that effort, that time spent, would then be fairly reflected in the game's AAA price tag.
What do you think you're doing?
Now I am going somewhere with this. This isn't just a Delta bashing session. The crux of it is that Delta has been sold as a AAA game at $70 and yet boasts none of the enhancements or innovations that warrant a AAA price tag. It's good, it's fun, but it's dated, and it absolutely did not necessitate a AAA budget to make. Indie breakthroughs like Clair Obscur have proved that you can make a game in Unreal with graphics that are equal, if not superior to those in Delta, along with a musical score that blows MGS out of the water, which is saying something, not to mention a complex and nuanced script supported by big budget voice acting, all of which is created with a moderate budget. Delta had the full storyboard and all of these assets sitting in the archives already. Whether the indie revolution that's been hinted at by Clair Obscur is truly here or not, it is around the corner, and everybody from Kojima to Baldur's Gate 3 creator Sven Vink has been saying it.
People in charge forbade them from cramming the game with anything whose only purpose was to increase revenue and didn't serve the game design. They didn't treat their developers like numbers on a spreadsheet. They didn't treat their players as users to exploit. And they didn't make decisions they knew were short-sighted and function of a bonus or politics.
Sven didn't target any one publisher, but flying under the radar or not, Konami absolutely exemplifies that profit-driven institution, but with its leadership unchanged, it would be naive to assume that its goals have changed. His prediction that a studio making a game for its own pleasure would win Game of the Year arrived only months before Clair Obscur, and it proved startlingly accurate. But that's because it wasn't a rogue prediction at all. The future of indie and AA game dominance is now a growing industry consensus that's increasingly concerning the world's biggest studios, and that includes Konami. And at first glance, Delta radiates this indie passion, a retelling of Metal Gear's saga in chronological order. Yet instead of boldly proceeding with a remake of Portable Ops and Peace Walker, two brilliant, albeit lesser-known titles that will come with risk, Konami copped out of that with a risk-averse claim of letting players decide, giving them free rein to pick pretty much anything and claim it was player choice. They're prioritizing money over art, as always. And so Konami can see the AAA bubble bursting as engines like Unreal absorb more of the development costs, and this is why they've made the tactical choice to scramble now in order to capitalize on their iconic IP as much as they can before gamers clock onto the fact that they aren't actually pumping out AAA games anymore. But like I said, nostalgia is a powerful thing, and so they may even get away with it for a while. Except there is one person on the sidelines who has not forgiven and will never forget.
The revenge arc of Hideo Kojima.
Hideo Kojima knows Konami better than anyone, their timelines, their goals, and their relentless pursuit of profits, and so every dollar he can deny them will be a deeply satisfying personal victory. His brilliance shines brightest when he's reined in, and while Death Stranding might not have been for everyone, it did allow his team to establish an industry presence and work out the studio's kinks. Jordan Peele writing for his upcoming horror OD suggests a real pivot toward the sort of creative input that could finally raise his games, literally, from tributes to trendsetters. And that bodes extremely well for his next game, because it's a game that he's been sitting on clearly for some time, and yet chose to unveil it to the public, seemingly with great glee, just months after Konami first teased audiences with Delta's reveal. And that game I'm talking about is Physint.
I'm very proud to announce my new role in the game Physint.
An experience that will merge cinema and game, just like MGS did a quarter of a century ago, and one that he claims will be the one and only true spiritual successor to MGS. To Konami, this was always about losing money, but to Kojima it was about losing face, losing his life's work, and no doubt losing a hell of a lot of sleep. Critics may be blind to the extent that Konami are ripping off gamers now, and with all the digital sales and massive libraries we have at our fingertips, understandably most gamers probably don't care, but this isn't about that. This is about witnessing a slow-burning chess game, a revenge plot in which Kojima has the next move, and having patiently waited a decade to stick the knife to Konami, this is how he's going to do it. Yes, they have his IP, but the value of something is only worth what people are willing to pay for it. And so lo and behold, in order to guarantee that players and critics alike are unable to ignore the disparity in value between a genuine AAA title and a watered-down remake masquerading as one, his plan is to immerse gamers around the world knee-deep in the genuine article, and watch in glee as Konami are forced to fold and drop the price of their MGS remakes closer to what they're actually worth. This will no doubt impact their ability to pull off marketing tricks like dropping down to $50 on Cyber Monday as if they're doing the world a favour. And make no mistake, they can afford to price it lower, but as long as they can get away with overpricing it, they will. And as overpricing games trickles down to the gamer, I for one am looking forward to seeing if Kojima succeeds in hitting them where it hurts, which for anybody else might be the heart or even between the legs, but for Konami always has been and always will be their pocket. So what do you reckon? Are you Team Kojima or Team Konami? And these days I think I'm just Team Gamer, but everyone has their own angle, so definitely stick it down in the comments if you have any thoughts. And as always, a like or a subscribe is so useful to me, so I'm very, very grateful if you choose to do that. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully see you again soon.